Welcome to the Let's Talk with Paula show, where we talk about many, many topics. There's so much going on in the world, and you know, so many people are passing away, and there's a lot of celebration that's going on too, because people are still getting married in this day and age, and I'm happy to know that. But it's a time that the whole world needs to come together in prayer, and we need to pray for the whole world, for everybody. And my heart goes out to anybody that's has lost a loved one, has lost a pet. Those guys that are fighting it, the ones that have passed away in that military, someplace they were, and quite a few of them got killed. So we pray for their families, and we pray for our military that keeps our borders secure. We really do. And not only that, our officers that are on the streets every day trying to keep our safe street for you to live in and the community that you live in. I also thank them for the young boy that was able to come back home from being taken off the street, and they let him come back and graduate. But then we turn around and get another young guy that was supposed to graduate on Sunday, and they took him on Friday. He was at a graduation practice, and they took him, snatched him up. He's an honor student. Very nice young boy, never been in trouble. Here legally, born here. They picked up the wrong boy again. That's what the news said. They picked up the wrong boy again, and they took him. So now, he missed his graduation on Sunday. So I don't know what that was all about, but that's very sad that they're messing with these kids that are graduating, in college, and productive citizens and citizens of the United States, and they're just being swept up off the street. And then I'm gonna let my guest host introduce himself, because I can go on and on, because it's just been so much going on that we can. How you doing today?
Well, good evening, and I'm very happy to be back this evening.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for having me come back.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, I'll introduce myself. My name is Donald Bell. I'm an attorney here in Maryland. My office is here in Prince George's County. I've had an office. I maintain an office in Greenbelt. For the last 15 years, I've had an office here in Prince George's County for like the last 21 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy to be back here today.
Mm-hmm.
And even under the circumstances what you're talking about, I think is pretty relevant, because there are a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about today.
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes in line with what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
the topic that we've talked about before. So when you're ready, you just let me know.
When you're ready, you go ahead. You're my co-host. You go right ahead. You can start right now.
Well, I wanted to really talk to you about, it's a topic that we talked about before, about people getting themselves together, getting their affairs in order. We talked about, I think we had a catchphrase, get yourself together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really relevant in the times that you're talking about people passing away. You work your whole life to acquire assets, to acquire things,
Mm-hmm.
And you're very happy with your house, your
Mm-hmm.
car,
Mm-hmm.
You got a retirement account, you have, you may have life insurance, you may have other assets, you may have like a brokerage account, with like stocks, with bonds, with things of that nature. And a lot of times people don't realize that, we're just one missed wake-up call away from,
Death.
From death. And if you don't have your stuff in order, you may have thoughts of how you want those assets to be dispersed among your loved ones and whatnot. But if you haven't
Put it on pen and
put it
paper.
up, if you had, and put it clearly,
Legally.
so there's no ambiguity in terms of who's supposed to get what,
Mm-hmm.
then the state or the government is going to decide who gets what.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's based the conversation we were having before we came on the air,
Mm-hmm.
and something that it's just been on my mind, something that I've been talking to clients about, whether they come in to talk to me about this or not.
Mm-hmm.
About just getting your affairs in order.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you're in your 20s or 30s,
Mm-hmm.
40s, 50s,
Mm-hmm.
60s, 70s.
Mm-hmm.
It's never too late.
And I have to say, because I had 4 deaths and my dog has passed, and I only had him not even a year yet.
Yeah.
But one of them that died was like 45.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he had called to order some food.
Mm-hmm.
When the people came, he was doing fine. This is what amazes me. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, because these people are doing well, except for one of them. They had major surgery, and they were older, right?
Yeah.
But they were still young, because she was just in her 70s, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, I'm just, based on what the ages that you're talking about,
Yeah.
they fit right in where you're talking.
Yes.
And she had the surgery, and you know, they didn't, oh, let me finish telling you about my cousin. Anyway, so when the guy got there to knock on the door, he didn't answer.
Mm-hmm.
But he called the food in. They said he sounded all right. So after he didn't answer, he went to the landlord and asked him what he called, check on him, because this guy called for this food. And when they went there, they said, just had passed away. Like he fell out on the floor, and that was it, you know. And he keeps in close contact with that part of the family. They said there wasn't anything wrong with him. I said something's going on. I don't know what it is, who it is, but it just, there's no boundaries, you know.
Yeah.
I praise God for my sister that had that major surgery, that before this time is what's going on now, that she's doing okay, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank God for that, because I hadn't heard about anybody dying
Mm-hmm.
prior to that, you know, in the family I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so, yes, if they don't, just so happened she had a NDA
The medical directive.
yeah, for do not resuscitate.
Do not resuscitate.
And she had talked to her children so they wouldn't be bickering about whether or not, you know, if they want to do something to, you know, keep me revived, they do,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't, you know what I mean?
But you know, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Mm-hmm.
one of the things about, if you don't have it in writing, and if you don't have it in a correct format,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can have a very strong-willed child or
Mm-hmm.
a very strong-willed family member
Mm-hmm.
that may just take over and may completely disregard
Right.
your
Request.
your request.
Mm-hmm.
You can have all the conversations with them you want to have,
Mm-hmm.
but if it's not in that medical directive, maybe you do want them to resuscitate you, and maybe this family member has very strong feelings the other way,
Right.
you know, and they take over, and they're like, we're not going to do it.
Well, if it's done through the hospital,
Well, that's the point that
exercise,
I'm trying to make. Yes.
then they can't
Yeah.
negate it. Okay.
Yes.
She had talked to all of the kids while
Yeah.
she had all 4 faculties, and all of them came on one accord. You
Yeah.
know, because it was a bad time. They knew what the risks were and everything, and whatever, you know,
Yeah.
happened. Nobody really wants to do that, but she had been sick for a long time.
Yeah.
So, but through the hospital, they ask you,
Yes.
do you have one? And if you sign one with them, then it's legit. Okay.
But that's the importance of, you know, just taking stock and getting some of these things in order.
Mm-hmm.
Not only, you know, with your financial assets, but with your medical,
Mm-hmm.
with the, you know, your medicals
Mm-hmm.
as well. And also, maybe you've done it, but maybe you did it
20 years
20
ago.
years ago or 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think I told when we had this conversation before, I told you about the cousin that I had,
Mm-hmm.
and he passed away in 2022, and he was 68, 69 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But the will and all the documents that he had was like from 1985,
Mm-hmm.
and he had left his mother as his
Beneficiary.
as his executor
Executor.
and the personal representative. But
And
she
she
had
passed away.
died in like 1998 or something like that, you know, and he never updated everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it caused a lot of problems and a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you done the right thing by getting all of this stuff in order
Right.
in the 80s.
Right.
You know, I think when his kids were like very young and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But he never gone back to update it because he probably just thought that, you know,
It-
hey, I got time.
Right.
You know, I'm healthy. I'm living. You know, I'm working. You know, doing very well and whatnot. But, you know, I just think that it's very important that you put that stuff together.
It is so very important, and I think that's why the people that have passed away have not had
Mm-hmm.
a problem. the person, somebody sent me a text message and asked me what I pray, but the warriors,
Yes.
you know, about they be on one accord.
Yeah.
And they actually they have been on one accord, and I'm glad to hear that, you know, because you know, prayer changes things. I mean, I don't care what you ask God for, and they,
Yeah.
in the that request, it was just, please would you let the family come on one accord and one agreement, you know, so it's no
But-
anger or
But
disparity.
I
that's
don't mean
going
to,
on.
but I will tell you this,
Mhm.
from my perspective.
In God's way, let me just say that.
Yeah.
God's will on what he wants to do. That's what the prayer was for.
Yeah.
It was for God's will.
Yeah.
Or whatever. If it's time for her to go, it's time for her to go. If it's
Yeah.
time for her to stay, it's time for her to stay. You know. And everybody just be on one accord with that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just needed to put that in there. I'm sorry.
No. And I agree with that. But I will tell you this. After, you know, the person passes and after the funeral,
Oh, yeah.
then,
That's
you
the-
know, that's what I'm talking
That's
about.
what you're talking about.
Because
Yes.
money changes people.
Oh, absolutely. That's
You know,
that's the part. That's
when,
right.
When there's going to be some money involved, or some
Yes.
property involved,
Yes.
you know, that changes people. So that's the
Yes.
reason why I'm saying, you know, in my opinion, in order for you to try to keep that continuity that may occur
Mm-hmm.
after you pass,
Mm-hmm.
you know, get your paperwork together, get it in
Mhm.
order.
Mm-hmm.
That way there won't be any issues, you know, because you can tell people all, you know how you want things done. But
Or what you can have, or what I'm
what you
gonna give
can-
you.
what you can have, what-
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not in writing, if it's not in the proper format, if it's
No.
not, you know, if it's not properly witnessed,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, go and record it at the probate office,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the county that you live in.
Mm-hmm.
That way, there won't be issues,
Mm-hmm.
because money will change people.
Oh, and that's usually when the argument starts,
Yeah.
if they don't have the will. But sometimes they do start at the hospital if
Oh,
the
yeah.
person doesn't
Of
have it
course.
straight. And so I was just glad that they were able to get that resolved with
I'm
no
happy too.
problem, you know, because, you know, one person will say no, and I'm going to say, yeah, well, she ain't tell me, blah, 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 you know, that kind of thing.
I understand.
Especially when a big NDA is in place, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? And somebody didn't hear, you know, that's what she did, you know,
Yeah.
and they said, well, no, but we just, whatever. I'm just
Mhm.
saying people can do that, but I'm just glad that they did not do that.
Yeah.
Now, like you said, families, money do change, and if it's not a will, and they do have these commercials every day on television that tell you, and the little man pops up out of nowhere because people say, well, when I pass away, I want you to take care of the kids. Little man pops up out of the car or anywhere and
Mhm.
said, not gonna work, doesn't happen.
Mhm.
You know, you got to get a title. You know, I mean, got to get a will. What does he say? It comes up on the thing. You have to put it in writing, so you know you have to get it legally done. What you say out your mouth is not going to work, you know.
I think it's very relevant, and it is really hit home for me, because you know I have children on two very different ends. I got a 21-year-old,
Mhm.
and I got this little 3-year-old.
Mhm.
And you know, the 21-year-old, he's about to launch.
Mhm.
You know, he's about to finish college and is about to, you know, go and conquer the world. But I
Mhm.
still got this 3-year-old right here. So
That's right.
we gotta. My wife and I said, you know, we have to take, you know, action right now.
Mhm.
You know, to make arrangements. You know, we're hoping that, you know, the hope and prayer is that, you know,
Mm.
we'll be able to watch her walk
And-
across the graduation stage
Absolutely.
and whatnot. But what happens if we don't?
Right.
Who's going to take care of this
Right.
this little one? So
And that's one of the commercials that comes on, and you know, and he tells you that you have to put it in the guy on television like you telling them today.
yeah,
So pay attention to the commercial because he has all kinds of little scenarios that he pops up out of nowhere and tell people, you know, I mean, just little simple things
yeah,
that they say that, well, when we pass away, blah, 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 you can hand this, or, you know, well, so-and-so going to take care of the kid. Nope, not going to happen. You know, you have to put it in writing, you
Yeah.
know.
so I'm going to tell you.
Excuse me.
I'm going to
You
tell
know
you.
the commercial that I'm talking about?
I have no idea.
Get out of here. It's a little black guy that just pops up out of anywhere and tells these people.
I don't
that-
get to watch a whole lot of TV
Oh, okay.
these days.
So
the
what is
TV
it?
that I get to watch
What?
is primarily Disney Channel. So.
Oh, okay, I get you.
So that's what the couple hours I do get, you know, I'm watching like princesses on Disney Channel.
And I ain't mad at you,
Yeah,
you
so-
know, because I'm a Disney, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
So I'm not mad at you at all. Yeah, so it is very important that you and I were on the same page with that, you know, with what's going on. And it just seems like right this moment, I don't know, you know, because I've been dealing with my own,
Yeah.
you know. And I reached out and told them if they needed me in any kind of way, to let me know. But, it was like 1, 2, 3 usually. And then my dog made 4, right? And he
Yeah.
was my child.
Yes.
He was like, really, I don't understand why we're not fighting in Congress to have insurance, animals that we have, pets that we own that are not tax deductible, because you have to take them to the vet.
Yeah.
You have to feed them. You have to make sure that they're okay. You have to do everything for them that you do for a child.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't have a babysitter, you got to put them in a kennel, or you got to get a hotel that you have to pay extra so that you can take them with you, right? And then you got some people just don't want dogs in their house. I don't care how big or small they are. We didn't used to be like that. Everybody had a dog. You know what I mean? And as long as your dog was well trained, your dog would go with you anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But now everybody getting so hinky now.
I grew up completely different. So down south, your dogs weren't allowed in the house.
Oh, well.
So people, I know it's completely like foreign in this area, but it took me years to get used
to people having dogs in the house.
Having dogs in the house.
And they want to bring them to your house.
And because now I think it's sort of changed some, but when I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, a dog didn't come into the house. Maybe it was because of the weather and because it didn't really get as cold.
And they're supposed to have a dog house outside.
Yeah, there would be a dog house outside and whatnot. I don't know. Maybe it was the fact that I didn't grow up in like one of the wealthy areas or something like that, or one of the more affluent areas.
We had dogs all the time.
Yeah.
And we always had big dogs.
Yeah.
And they were always pedigree. All the dogs I've ever had have been pedigree dogs, and that's the thing. They're very, very temperamental, sensitive dogs. They get sick, drop in the hat. Okay.
Yeah.
So the dog.
And I want to say I'm not advocating that you put your dog outside. I'm just talking about how
Bear
I grew
could
up.
stay outside because he was a child. He weighed like 40 pounds. Okay. He was a big dog. He could stay outside in the yard because it was a fence.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the little dog, you couldn't let him go out there because if it was a gate or that he could slither through, or the
It's
back
almost like a little
somewhere.
rabbit where they can get underneath.
Oh yeah,
it
he was when I tried because he missed that, so you had to walk him, because he couldn't go out. And then the other thing, we had big old buzzards and turkey buzzards and in our neighborhood, and they would swoop down, pick that dog.
They would pick up the dog.
They would pick up that dog, and he would have been gone. We would have gone outside thinking he got out the yard, and the turkey or the hawk or whatever they are. There's a whole lot of them in Bowie. Okay.
Oh wow.
Big old turkey. Whatever they are, hawks, they stand this tall and their span is great. And, would have picked him up off that ground and taken him for lunch,
Wow.
So we couldn't do that. You had to take them out. And a lot of people you see walking out that are walking their dogs are very little dogs. This is something with mid-sized dogs.
Yeah.
But if you got a big old fence, the ones that you can't see in, you can't see out, and they really can't get underneath anything. The big dogs usually the ones that stay out.
Gotcha.
But they bring them in the house too, though.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess up in this area, we're just a little bit more lenient. You know, our big dogs would stay outside. But if it rained or something, the dog came in the house.
Came in the house. Okay.
But I think the thing with the little dogs became stylish is when all these movie stars was taking these little dogs and putting them in their purses.
Maybe that's what it was.
And carrying them in the houses, you know, and going out everywhere. They would carry them in the grocery stores and stuff, in these purses and stuff, And then
I will tell you, I have an aunt right now who's my mom's younger sister, about 18 months, and she has a little bitty dog, and she keeps the dog in the house, and it's like her little child.
It is. It really is.
She lives in Alabama, like where I'm from. So,
okay.
So I guess the times have changed.
They have changed. I guess for people in Alabama, up here it's always been that way.
Yeah.
But the carrying them around and taking them to people's different houses, now that changed since you've seen these movie stars years ago start carrying them around in little pocketbooks and carrying them in the store, you know what I mean, carry them to the house. And my son got so upset with somebody that came because she just thought that it was okay, and he said no, because he doesn't want them in his house.
Yeah.
And she said, I thought I called and I asked and said, but somebody else was complaining. He said it was okay, but it was somebody else in the family that year was complaining about the dog. And the dog wasn't bothering nobody.
Yeah.
Okay. But they had an allergy, they said, so,
I understand.
So because she said, I would have never bought them if I thought it was going to be a problem.
Yeah.
You know, I would have did what I had to do. So it just depends on people.
Yeah.
And it depends on what they have going on. If they have allergies, then that's acceptable. You know, you understand that, you know, and you can't take that chance of somebody else getting sick because the child has an allergy to the fur, you know. But, yeah, the little dogs and the big dogs, they are expensive. They are children, and I just don't understand why you can't. You know, one time you didn't have veterinary insurance. You didn't have it. You had to pay out your pocket.
Yeah.
So now they have. Now so many different companies, guys, if you don't know, that have veteran insurance. I mean, not veteran, veterinary insurance that you can get for your dog because one time you didn't have it, but now you can get insurance for your dogs. Healthcare I'm talking about for your dog. So now they have it, and some of them are very reasonable. So if you don't, you need to look it up because we did not have that for people around my age in this area. We did not have dog health insurance. You know, you would have to take them down to the place where if they had a vet hospital in your neighborhood, or you take them down to the pound where they take dogs, and somebody would look at them down there and give them their shots and stuff like that. You know, it was just a very different time.
I understand.
Yeah. So, but now they make it, you know, so that you can. So if you don't, you know, look it up. It's something that's very reasonable, you know, because you just never know. You know, your dog is fine, and you just never know. But I'm just saying that I said I was going to investigate and see whether or not these spiders come out, they're seasonal, and see whether or not they are poisonous, because it's amazing at the same time, you know. Both dogs is just really, really, really bad. Then one of my ex-husbands died on the day before my birthday. So now I'm kind of apprehensive about my sister having surgery done on the day before my birthday. You know, because surgery is due down in Florida on June the 9th, you know, and I'm asking her to postpone it because it's just too much, you know. And I had to go around and do his last rites. You know, my kids called me and asked me so I could go to the house and do his last rites, and I did that for him. And I did that for my dog as well. Because you know how they say all dogs go to heaven.
Okay.
It's a movie out. You need to show your daughter that movie. I think it's a Disney movie. It's All Dogs Go to Heaven. It's a very good movie. It's real light. It's a kid's movie.
Yeah.
Basically, it's All Dogs Go to Heaven. And I believe that because they are one of your children.
Yeah.
You know. But anyway, the other thing is that I think that it's so horrible that they're still picking up these kids that are graduating from high school, graduating from college, don't have any record, and every time that happens, it's somebody that does not have any record, not anything going on with them. They're trying to graduate from college, and they take them away because they just got to take somebody away. You know what I mean? And that person was not the person that they were looking for. And the regular news, you're not seeing this stuff. And so MSNBC and CNS is showing you, giving you most of the updates because they stopped showing it on the televisions, because a lot of the television shows that they're saying are being prohibited from showing us the pickets and things that are going around across the country. So you need to take a moment just one time in your office, not while you're at home. Just go over to one of those channels and look at them, and so you can see the protests. There are protests that are actually going on in this country. But the news media, from what they're saying, have been censored to giving us information about what's going on in the country and different things that are actually happening, like the graduation. If I think one news channel, local news channel, did show the graduation for this young boy. It just happened this weekend, you know, but it was like a little blurb. But I'm glad that they did show it because people know that this is happening to people. Because if you live like where we live, I had a friend that said they went down to Florida. It was total different news. You wouldn't think nothing was going on in the world, you know, strange or picketing or things that are happening, you know, to people. You just don't hear about it. And then all of a sudden, you know, I was watching one of those MSNBC shows, and they said that yes, they're censoring those folks, and they're suing one of the companies because they said something that the one of these people didn't like, you know, and they got a multiple, but yet they say whatever they want about everybody else, and that's kind of like a double standard.
Well,
you know?
people get their news from different places.
Yeah.
I think there was, studies going out showing, the different places that people get their news. I mean, younger people are probably more getting their news from like social media, internet, and places like that. A lot of older people, still rely on cable and things of that nature. So, I think we live in a very divided country, and depending on where you get your news, that'll sort of determine like what your viewpoint is on like a lot of these issues that are coming up. Be happy to discuss like issues as it relates to due process, habeas corpus, things of that nature.
And they still having those problems.
Well, I mean, but those are issues that are constantly going through the courts and things of that nature.
Yeah, the Supreme Court justice just passed one that was one of they were fighting against somebody, and they just passed it. That they have to give them 2 days before they take anybody away out the country. They have to. The Supreme Court, it was a federal judge that negated what they were doing and told them that they have to give them at least a 2-day hearing before they take them away. They just can't just take them off the street and put them on an airplane, So I was kind of glad to hear that, because at least everybody's supposed to be, especially if they're American citizen, have due process.
Well, due process applies to anyone who's on American soil. So it says, so it doesn't say American citizen, it says no individual. Well, so any individual, is entitled, if you're here, no matter whether you're here legally, illegally, however legal, I mean, you're entitled to due process. You're entitled to your right to be heard.
Yeah.
It doesn't entitle you to stay here, if you're not an American citizen, but it entitles you at least to be able to go into court and be able to tell a judge or
your side on the documentation.
Yeah, your side. Like, hey, you have a right to be heard.
And so, and that's what it is in this particular scenario. So it doesn't say that no, that they're going to get to stay, but they do have the right to have due process.
Yes.
And
now, where you get that due process can be determinative of whether or not, I mean, you will prevail, or I mean, ultimately you may prevail or whatnot.
Well, if the news channels can get that these guys, American citizens, I mean, they graduating, they had never been locked up. Like the young man I'm just talking about just got picked up again, another graduate. One was a college student, this was a high school student. Yeah. And they verified that information, and they were able to, they put it out. And so, but.
Well, I'll have to go back and I wasn't aware of that, so I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, it just happened over the weekend.
Yeah.
So, we just have to be careful and be diligent and pray for the whole world and pray for our President of the United States, He needs prayer. We need prayer. All of us, the whole world needs prayer. So I'm just asking everybody to pray so we can come on one accord and stop the killing, please. Guys out here, stop killing and robbing people. Everybody's having a bad time. Stop killing and robbing people. But then we're going to say good night.